September 11th, 2001. The sky above New York was perfectly blue, the kind of morning nobody remembers until history chooses it. Inside the Twin Towers, thousands of people had just started work. Phones rang, elevators moved, windows reflected the sunrise. Then came the sound. Not loud at first, just confusion. People looked upward as smoke exploded from the North Tower. Burning paper drifted through the streets like snow. Most believed it was a terrible accident. Even news anchors sounded uncertain. But 17 minutes later, the illusion collapsed. A second plane sliced across live television and disappeared into the South Tower in a ball of fire. In that moment, fear changed shape. This was no accident. Across New York, people froze in silence. Some screamed, some ran, others simply stared upward, unable to process what they were seeing. Inside the towers, the situation became unbearable. Smoke-filled stairwells, phones stopped working, people trapped above the impact zones began calling their families. Some said goodbye. Others kept pretending everything would somehow be okay. Far away in Florida, President George Bush sat inside a classroom surrounded by children reading quietly. Then someone leaned into his ear and whispered, "America is under attack." For a few seconds, his face didn't move. But the entire country already had, because the fear was spreading faster than the fire. And then came another report, another hijacked plane, this time Washington. At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon, the military heart of the United States. Now, nobody knew how many planes were still in the air. The White House began evacuating. Fighter jets scrambled overhead. Air traffic controllers watched screens filled with panic and disappearing signals. For the first time in modern history, American airspace was shutting down completely. But the most terrifying story was still unfolding above the clouds. United Airlines Flight 93. The passengers on board had learned what was happening through phone calls from loved ones below. They knew about New York. They knew about the Pentagon. And slowly, they realized the truth. Their plane was part of the attack too. Inside that cabin, fear turned into something else. Decision. Some passengers began making final calls home. Others quietly discussed a plan. They understood something horrifying. If they did nothing, more people would die. So ordinary civilians made an impossible choice. They fought back. The cabin erupted into chaos. Screams, crashes, violent shaking. Nobody knows exactly what happened in those final moments. But at 10:03 a.m., Flight 93 crashed into an empty field in Pennsylvania instead of reaching its suspected target. The passengers never returned home, but many believe they saved countless lives. Back in New York, the nightmare reached its breaking point. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapsed. Not slowly, violently. An entire skyscraper disappeared into a cloud of ash as thousands ran through smoke-filled streets. People covered in dust wandered like ghosts. Then, 29 minutes later, the North Tower fell too. The skyline of New York changed forever in front of the entire world. Nearly 3,000 people were killed that morning. But the damage did not end there. After 9/11, fear became part of everyday life. Airport security transformed overnight, governments expanded surveillance powers, wars began in Afghanistan and Iraq, entire communities faced suspicion, hate, and violence. The attacks lasted only hours, but the psychological aftermath lasted decades. And maybe that was the deepest scar of all. Because 9/11 didn't just destroy buildings, it destroyed the feeling that the world was safe. Closing. More than 20 years later, people still remember exactly where they were when they watched the towers fall. But maybe the real question is this: did 9/11 end that morning? Or are we still living in the